just a few weeks ago. Stick with 7 and WXYZ.com for the latest development. Williams still has 5 years and $65 million left on his contract. Williams led the Pistons through one of their worst seasons with 14 wins and 68 losses.
The NBA offseason's officially here, and the Detroit Pistons haven't wasted any time completely overhauling their roster. So we have a lot to get to. Before we get to the content, make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications to help us on our grind to 1 million subscribers. Now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? During the 2020 offseason, the Detroit Pistons decided to name Troy Weaver their general manager. Weaver had an outstanding track record as both a coach and also as a scout, most famously urging Sam Presti and the Oklahoma City Thunder to draft Russell Westbrook with the number 4 pick in the 2008 NBA draft, which was considered to be a huge reach at the time because Russell Westbrook wasn't considered to be an elite prospect. And the Detroit Pistons were at a point where they desperately needed excellent scouting. So going into the 2020 NBA draft, all eyes were on Troy Weaver to try to make a dent in order to select a franchise cornerstone so they could turn around the Detroit Pistons' fortunes. And who would Troy Weaver select with his very first pick as the Detroit Pistons general manager? Well, he had a huge choice to make. It was between Tyrese Halliburton, the point guard out of Iowa State, and Killian Hayes, which was the NBA draft's equivalent of the mystery box. You know the Family Guy clip where they say they'll give Peter Griffin a boat, or he could choose from the mystery box, and he says,
"I'll take the box."
Well, Troy Weaver essentially opted for the mystery box over Tyrese Halliburton. And this would be the very beginning of a very tumultuous era with the Detroit Pistons, filled with some very bad luck, might I add. The Pistons' strategy wasn't flawed at all whatsoever. Throughout this era, they decided to take chances on players who were once viewed as high-end talent, but then became huge, colossal draft busts. Whether that was Marvin Bagley from the Sacramento Kings or James Wiseman from the Golden State Warriors, the Pistons tried to take as many chances on young talent that was once perceived as high-end talent and was willing to gamble on their potential. And the result was one of the worst seasons that they've ever seen in NBA history this past year. You see, the Detroit Pistons' bad luck came in multiple forms. They were extremely unlucky in the NBA draft, except for the selection of Cade Cunningham, but they were also unlucky whenever it came to getting lottery balls to bounce for them the right way. In 2023, they had one of the highest odds at getting the number 1 overall pick so they could select Victor Wembanyama. Instead, they fell all the way down to number 5 and they had to select Asar Thompson, who, by the way, isn't a bad player by any means, but it's not Victor Wembanyama. Troy Weaver did everything he could to turn around this franchise, and to be honest, some of his decisions weren't as terrible as selecting Killian Hayes over Tyrese Halliburton, but throughout this era, obviously, if things aren't going your way, the general manager and the head coach are going to be scapegoated the most. Throughout the Troy Weaver era, he maintained the same head coach in place, Dwayne Casey, an individual that could have potentially had a NBA championship had LeBron James decided to go to the Los Angeles Lakers a year or two sooner. A man whose legacy was known as dominating the East when he was the coach of the Toronto Raptors, only to lose to LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers consistently in the playoffs. Not a bad coach at all whatsoever, but once you decide to coach one of the worst teams in the NBA just so you can get a sweet payday, obviously your win percentage as a head coach is going to take a huge hit. So last year, the Detroit Pistons were officially out on Dwayne Casey. See, as a result of the Phoenix Suns' brand new mad scientist owner, Matt Ishbia, coming in and deciding to completely overhaul the roster and make it several orders of magnitude worse, might I add, whether it was trading for Bradley Beal to pair with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and having no depth at all whatsoever, or firing Monty Williams prematurely before giving him an opportunity to coach Kevin Durant, there was no question about it. Monty Williams was a blue chip head coach that took the Phoenix Suns to brand new heights that was now available to be hired. So the Detroit Pistons decided to hire him, signing him to one of the craziest contracts in NBA history, a 6-year, $78.5 million contract. So Monty Williams secured a $20 $20 million plus buyout from the Phoenix Suns in May of 2023, then got hired a month later by the Detroit Pistons, signing a 6-year, $78.5 million deal, which is the largest coaching contract in NBA history at the time. And the result was one of the most embarrassing seasons in NBA history for the Detroit Pistons. At one point, the Pistons lost a NBA record 28 straight games, the longest losing streak in one season in NBA history. They also became the 13th team in NBA history to have a winless month, going 0-15 in November. And there is a huge question of whose fault was this? Is it the fact that Monty Williams is a terrible head coach, or is it the fact that he had a terrible roster? Well, both could be the culprit here. I mean, there are points where Monty Williams was playing Killian Hayes over Jaden Ivey, but the roster was terrible. I don't think there was much more he could have done given the situation, and he knew what he was signing up for at the end of the day. But unfortunately for Monty Williams, the Detroit Pistons decided to move on from Troy Weaver in the beginning of June. And typically when a brand new general manager comes in, that means you could expect a brand new head coach and significant amounts of change, which means Monty Williams is probably really sad to hear this news, but after one season, the Detroit Pistons have dismissed him, which means he leaves with 5 years and $65 million plus left on his deal. New president Trajan Langdon will move to make his own coaching hire now. Wow. Okay, so I'm pretty sure Monty Williams is very sad about this news because he pretty much is getting paid $100 million for the work that he did over the past 2 years, and he could just sit on his couch now. Like, he can literally travel the world. He doesn't have to work a day in his life ever again, and he doesn't have to coach the worst team in basketball anymore. It's really sad because when you take a look at the head coaching history of the Detroit Pistons, this team didn't really choose poorly with their head coaches, and they all made sense. I mean, they brought in Stan Van Gundy in 2014 to try to do with Andre Drummond what he did with Dwight Howard in Orlando. They brought in Dwayne Casey, who won Coach of the Year the very year he was fired. They brought in Monty Williams, who also won Coach of the Year and led the Phoenix Suns to the NBA Finals. These weren't bad coaching decisions. The roster was just terrible. And I don't typically agree with Stephen A. Smith, although I have tremendous love and respect for him, but he's right when he says this.
I would say this. Hey, here's what I would tell you. Monty Williams is obviously a God-fearing man, very religious and what have you. He needs to get on his knees and look up and thank his heavenly Father that he was let out of that miserable situation in Detroit.
I didn't know where that was going.
He couldn't be happier. I know he's going to be happy, and obviously he's going to have other opportunities down the line because that situation in Detroit was an absolute mess. He regretted it from the time he got there. It's just that it's something he'll never say publicly.
But it didn't take Stephen A. Smith to be very wrong about what he would say next. Obviously, whenever a blue chip head coach hits the market, everybody's gonna link him to one team.
I know we've been talking a lot about J.J. Redick, but with Monty Williams available, that is a situation that the Los Angeles Lakers should look at. Okay, so I would definitely say that as well. They should look at it. Obviously, Jeannie Buss, you know how much I love Jeannie Buss. I'm rooting for her to find the right person for the job. Respect Rob Pelinka, what he's going to do, you know. And yes, I respect Kurt Rambis too. I was joking around about him earlier, but I respect him too. So listen, they're all going to be a part of the process, and we'll see what happens. And you know, I think Monty Williams definitely should be a candidate for that job.
Now look, at first glance, this is a very adorable story. I mean, Anthony Davis and Monty Williams do go way back. I mean, who knows? The Lakers could sign Chris Paul and have Monty Williams and Anthony Davis and Chris Paul all playing together. It'd be such a cute little story featuring the early Anthony Davis era New Orleans Hornets and also the late Chris Paul era New Orleans Hornets. It'd be a pretty adorable move. But Shams got to work immediately, letting us all know that the Lakers don't feel the same way.
Yeah, Monty Williams wasn't played strongly in 2019 when they hired Frank Vogel. And by the way, Frank Vogel gets fired this year. Adrian Griffin got fired. I mean, all these coaches that are getting fired, we're noticing a quick trigger of coaches. Monty Williams got fired in back-to-back summers. It's just a crazy stat. But Monty Williams was definitely in play with the Lakers in 2019. They went and hired Frank Vogel. It was really down to Ty Lue. They missed out on Ty Lue. They missed out on Monty Williams. Then they go hire Frank Vogel. So, I mean, there's been interest there in the past. I have not heard. Obviously, this just happened with Monty Williams. There's been rumblings that this was possible because of the fact that Trajan Langdon got the autonomy to eat whatever money he needs to for Monty Williams. It's $65 million. I have not gotten the sense yet that Monty Williams is in the picture here. But, I mean, listen, he is a two-time coach of the year.
Now, why wouldn't the Lakers be interested? Well, they clearly have one person in mind, an individual who should be announced very, very soon. At the end of the day, I don't think Monty Williams is too sad about this happening, but I really feel a lot of empathy for Detroit Pistons fans because I don't really know what the light at the end of the tunnel is here. I don't know how this team can get better. I don't know what head coach can save you. There's a very long road ahead for this team to improve, but hopefully with a brand new general manager and a new head coach, they could start on that road. If you're a Pistons fan, let me know in the comment section down below. What do you guys think about all this? Do you have any hope for the future? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.